maskaxdii dunidu malaasan mawjadaheeda kala miirtay ee macnaysay maarkii qarsoona
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا محمد. Okay, fellow teachers, as we have seen before, the English language textbook comprises of segments A, B, C, D, E, F. A, listening and speaking, reading comprehension. C, vocabulary. D, grammar. E, literature, aspect of oral literature, sometimes riddles, sometimes proverbs, sometimes tongue twisters. We have discussed this before, and I know by now you know where I'm coming from. You know what I'm implying. So for this lesson, I'm going to be discussing how we are going to teach the listening and speaking for grade 12, unit 5. So this overview, I'm not going to dwell on it. We have already talked before. So as you can see, unit 5, grade 12, it begins with the listening and speaking. Basically, there is a title, although it's not missing, it's not indicated here. If you are an English teacher and you access the book, you will find it has a passage named "The Lion with a Thorn in His Paw." So, the most important thing is, how are we going to develop the listening and speaking skills, the reading comprehension, reading skills? We have talked much about it. We might talk again on maybe on another segment, but for now, I'm going to be discussing listening and speaking. Now, in listening and speaking, these two concepts of English language go together. They are two sides of the same coin. There is no speaking without listening, and vice versa. So listening, as we have earlier said before, that in listening there are so many objectives. One of the main objective of this particular lesson is going to be complete the proverbs and explain their meaning. So proverbs is going to be the topic of this lesson in the listening and speaking segment. And this is the objective: complete the proverbs and explain their meaning. We have so many times discussed about what proverbs are. Now what you do, since we have chosen this methodology, as we have always talked about it before, since it's a student-centered approach, brainstorm, bring the student to the environment of the content you want to teach them. Ask them questions. What is a proverb? What are their use? How do we employ proverb in the learning of English language? What are the features of proverbs? What characteristics do they have? How are they different from other expressions, like idiomatic expressions? How are they different? What are they used for? What are they? And as we have discussed before, students will definitely tell you these are genres of oral literature, they are form of oral literature. just like riddles, folklore stories, narratives, tongue twisters, puns, and so on. So this is the methodology. The next step, which is going to help you make this work easy for you, without straining yourself, explaining everything. Tell the student, because one of the methodologies we use in listening and speaking, most of the times, is discussion. We use turn taking, we use dialogues, we use these negotiation skills that create interactive segment between students so that they develop social learning. Remember, students, when they interact and discuss, they learn from one another more than they do from the teachers. So let them discuss. And how do you do that? Let the learners here means ask them, instruct them, tell the learners, carefully read the proverbs, and then complete and explain the meaning of each proverb. Now, if you tell the student, read carefully the proverbs and explain the meaning of each proverb, students might not get it clear. Because as we know, proverbs have meaning, yes. But how do you define proverbs? How do students get? You need to give them guidelines. In as much as this system is student-centered, that does not mean that the teacher, the space of the teacher is absent. No. There is always do and don'ts. Guide them. Tell them, this is what I want. The proverbs have explicit meaning, outer meaning. Like, for example, if I say, two heads are better than one. And then you ask a student, tell me what that proverb means. Definitely, he will give you the explicit meaning, that upper meaning, that two people are better than one. For example, if they are doing work, when one person is doing and when two people are doing, when two are doing are better. But does it end there? This is the deeper meaning. This is a proverb that is explaining the importance of unity. Unity is strength. The deeper meaning. Understanding of this proverb, what does the student gain from understanding of proverbs in terms of language, besides the oral literature? This student is going to learn vocabulary, because the proverbs use words. They use all the parts of speech, nouns, verbs, adjectives, adverbs. Proverbs use figurative language. They use alliterative words, alliteration, sound patterns, which will in turn help them develop the skills to study written literature like poetry. So it's very important. When you're telling them to explain, make it very clear to them that you're explaining both the outer meaning and the deeper meaning of each proverb. Then ask learners to read the poem. Now, as I was saying, it's going to help them understand poetry. Because poets are people who write poems. Poets use words economically. Poems are not written like we write essay. When you're writing an essay, you use paragraphs. You use, long sentences. Poems use words economically. They're very economical. They don't use many words. They use very few words with deeper meaning. They use this figurative language, sound patterns, as I've said, rhyme scheme, the rhyming words, alliterating words, these words of wisdom. Just proverbs. Now, learning of proverbs in listening and speaking will not only enhance the ability of the student to learn English language in terms of grammar and speaking, they also broaden their wit, improves the intelligence of the student. The student will start thinking outside the box. When you tell him write an essay, he's going to employ proverbs to enrich his writing. You see, by enriching his writing, adding flavor. You know, literature is an art. Literature is an art. As a teacher, I will advise you to be always step ahead of your student. You read literature texts, whether oral or written literature. Study the genres of literature. Be a good reader. And get more information. So that when a student asks you questions, because in this student center, in as much as you give them more activities, they will be posing questions. So it is time you also prepare. Come to class when you're already prepared. Then ask the learners to read the poem Society by Hadrawi and discuss what the poem is about. Now, basically, poetic questions, when you want to analyze a poem, we analyze them in some basic ways that are simple if only you get it right. Analyze the poem in terms of setting. What is setting? When was this? When we talk of setting, we talk in two scenarios, two phenomena. One, time setting. When was this poem composed? Was it a time when there were no mobile phones, there were no internet? Olden days? Was it performed or composed at this modern age? When you know the time setting, when you look at the time setting, you will easily identify the themes in that poem. Because analyzing a poem, student is going to analyze poem in terms of setting, thematic analysis in terms of themes. What are the messages carried in the poem? Theme simply means the main idea. One poem can have many themes, but there are main themes and minor themes. What is this theme? You know, when a poet want to write a poem, there is something in his mind that he wants to share with the audience. He creates a character to become his mouthpiece, to speak for him. The way I'm using a microphone, talking to you, that person is what we call the persona in the poem. Look at the way the persona talks. This will lead you to the time setting and geographical setting, where this poem has been set, which society is addressing, you know, what do they believe, what are the themes, thematic analysis, and and setting, time setting, geographical setting, and thematic analysis, themes. Number 3, linguistic, language use and style. Remember, poets don't use language the way other writers or use. When you are writing a poem, you use figurative language, linguistic devices, metaphors, similes, personification, hyperbole. These things, all these devices, stylistic devices of literature, if you, in book 3, in book 2, in book 1, since this book is going on a spiral from simple to complex, you will find this in details. Take your time as a teacher. Read. Before dictating to students, read. Come to class when you have the knowledge. Then don't stress yourself taking notes, unless when you want to correct students and you have seen their responses, there are some areas to correct. Just tell them to discuss the poem and answer these questions. What the poem is about. Now, what the poem is about sometimes can be the subject matter. What is it about? What is it addressing? Social responsibility, conflict, education. It's about war. It's about love. And so many things. Who is the poet's target audience? Who is he targeting? Who is this poet talking to? This will, to understand the target audience of the poet, this is what we call the you, the person who is addressed. Look at the way the words are used. You. Yeah? Do this, the active and passiveness of the sentence used. Who are the audience? Sometimes a poet will write a poem to educate the society or to stop them from a vice like ethnicity, war, tribalism, corruption. So who is he addressing? Those who are corrupt, the leaders. Those who are fighting. So what is it about? Who is the poet's target audience? Another one asks them to discuss the poet's thoughts and feelings. How does he feel? Now, to understand the feelings of the poet, look at the use of words, especially those verbs. Is he feeling sad, melancholic, happy, ecstatic, depressed, sad? For example, if a poet is writing about corruption and how it is ruining the economy of his country, how corruption is the enemy of development, definitely the feeling of the poem will be sad one, disappointment. He's disappointed with the leaders, he's not happy. If he's writing of a good leader, a hero or heroine, and he's praising, the feeling will be opposite. It will be ecstatic, happy, and so on. The tone and mood of the poem. Now, the tone and mood. The mood is how the poem, when you read or listen to, how does it make you feel? Will you feel sympathetic for the persona, the person who has written the poem? Will you feel sympathetic? Yeah? Will you feel sad? Mood. What is the mood? Is it gloomy? Is it creating hope or despair? And to know the mood, you must understand the tone. The tone. For example, tone is how words are said. Even in normal English, if the teacher, you as a teacher, if you tell a student, Hassan, you are late. That is the tone. And when you say, Hassan, do you know you are late? The tone is different. You sure? This boy, because your tone was polite, it was not carrying expression that is strong. It was a mild expression. You showed that you don't like him coming late, yet you don't want to show him that you are annoyed. So you use the tone that is going to make him understand his mistake without offending his feelings. See? So tone will make you understand the mood of the poem. Okay? Take it, audience. See the poet's feeling, I think, thoughts and feelings. No, okay, now for you to know if the student has understood this, since we have discussed the objective here, how are we going to achieve the objectives? We have discussed the methodologies. If I want to know if a student has really understood the poem and answered my question, how am I going to assess? How can I tell that my student has at least understood what I have taught? Give him the questions, the ones I have listed here already, and so many other questions in the book. These questions come in different form. For example, there is a question. The student reads a poem, and then the question comes. Can take, like you can ask the question in less than 30, in not more than 30 words, explain what this poem is about. Okay? In less than 30 words, explain what this poem is about. Now, as I have said, since poems are not arranged the way passages are written, they are organized in stanzas. A stanza, group of lines, make one stanza. Another group of lines, make one stanza. You can even choose read the first two stanzas of the poem and identify and explain two themes evident in those two stanzas. The student will read the poem, analyze it thematically, give you response. Now, as a teacher, always give the student his feedback. Correct his mistake and bring him back how he has performed. And where they have made mistakes, correct it without naming the student. Make sure you give them the correct answers so that on the next lesson, the same mistake is not repeated. Learning this is an ongoing process. It's an ongoing process. Written poetry questions and oral questions. Sometimes these questions to motivate the students. Yeah? After you have read the poem, select 3 questions by show of hand. Ask them, let them answer orally. And it's very important, oral questions and answers. Let them answer the questions. Now with those, now that was for poetry part in the listening and speaking segment. The next session or the next part of this unit, just like other units, is the reading comprehension, and which is going to be discussed in another session. For that, I hope you have got something from what I have said, and I will stop there. Thank you very much. Until maybe we meet again. Thank you.
murtida dhuux aqoontiisa baro lagama maarmi